I love storytelling. No matter what form that story takes place, if it hooks me in, I'm sold. Whenever I play video games, ones I enjoy the most are the story-driven supernovas. When I chose my university degree, I went with film production, literally the labor of telling stories. And now that I'm somewhat using my degree to actually talk about stories in movies and TV shows, there's one avenue I haven't quite tackled after all of these months, and that is anime. Surprise, surprise, I like anime. In the past, it's always been a bit of an embarrassing pastime to admit, because oftentimes it can be very, cringy. But as the internet has grown, so has the invasion of anime on the Western world, and more people just kinda get it. And the cringy stuff is more avoidable now. Mostly. Generally, I've been quite quiet on talking about anime in the past because of those insecurities, but I actually first got into it back when I was about 10 years old, in the ancient year of 2006. I found out about this weird story art form through an enthusiastic friend of mine who wanted to share the crazy world of anime he found on an old website called Anime Dubs. That doesn't exist anymore. But my friend showed off the likes of his favorites like Trigun, Bleach, and Cromartie High School. Just look at this!
He ate my pencil. He ate my pencil!
Hilarious, right? I'm sure 10-year-old me will pick the most artistically significant piece of fiction that really harkens on the symbolic nature of storytelling. Oh no. No! Needless to say, I didn't want to reveal my secrets to many other people, and by 2010 I was done with anime anyway. Couldn't handle the agonizing wait each week for the next fix of Seikon no Quasar or something. Fast forward to 2015 and I start getting into anime again after an acquaintance recommends this newish show called Sword Art Online. But this time I'm a bit more of a connoisseur of what good anime is. Yeah, that's right, I watch Rail Wars not for the character designs, no, I watch Rail Wars for the multi-track drifting.
They ask you how you are, you just have to say that you're fine when you're not really fine, but you just...
Still, with a smarter brain and a more casual approach thanks to life getting awfully busy, I watched some better shows like One Punch Man, My Hero Academia, ReZero, Shokugeki, the stuff that's still getting new seasons even now, huh? And as I moved in with my girlfriend this year in 2019, who's an especially large fan of anime and all things Asian, naturally, I've been watching a lot more anime recently. And that leads us right to one of our favorite anime shows still airing right now, Dr. Stone. Technically starting last season, but its runtime isn't quite over yet, so... Now we've only just caught up with the whole thing and have no knowledge of what happens beyond the anime adaptation as of right now, but from what we've seen so far, this show is absolutely phenomenal. Dr. Stone takes place in modern Japan, as most animes do, and starts with a mysterious green light swiping across the entire Earth, turning every single human to stone. Like most animes don't. 3,700 years later, our protagonist Senku Ishigami awakens in a world where all signs of human life have been wiped out. Buildings, establishments, technology, everything has reverted back to the Stone Age. And with this, he begins his quest to not only save humanity, who are still in their stone forms, but to also restore civilization and restore the world's technology right back up to the Space Age in the midst of this primitive era. Using his knowledge of science, he is going to bring back 200 million years worth of human knowledge and evolution. And you can too by subscribing. 90% of my viewers aren't subscribed, so you know what to do. Sorry, I had to plug it in somewhere. Back to the video. Now that on its own sounds like a pretty unique premise and great for anyone who loves that kind of primitive building fantasy, but Dr. Stone is far more than a simple fun concept for the characters to play around in, because one of the things that sets this anime far above so many other shows from many other different formats is its faithfulness to real science. The weirdly twisted fake science and logic found in so many other films and TV shows, especially of a Western nature, have become such a commonplace that it's genuinely refreshing to see it tackled in a story that's deep fried in genuine realism, and practically comes off as educational from learning how these primitive science pieces all come together. And this isn't a trait that is exclusive to just Dr. Stone. There's a whole slew of other anime shows that have this similar sense of realism in education. Shokugeki and food, Cells at Work on the human biology, Shimonetta and... never mind. I could probably make a whole separate video about educational anime shows, but for now, let's get back to Dr. Stone. So Dr. Stone's educational tidbit is science, and that envelops pretty much everything. Chemistry, biology, physics, the whole shebang. If it's needed for survival, it's gonna be covered. If it's simply showing off the magical developments of modern civilizations, it'll show up too. Obviously, I won't be going into too much spoiler territory, but the early stages of the show give us an extra look into how to make alcohol, albeit in a pretty simple format, how basic structures can manipulate one's strength, and how to make a bomb. You know, precisely what you need to survive. Each of these elements are small little challenges for our protagonist to overcome, and though it's very unlikely that you'll actually be putting these to use, the way that each project is enriched with real-life tidbits of knowledge about how everything works, when it was discovered and what it was used for, all works in such an effective way without feeling like a boring mandatory session during those dreadful school years or something. But even though the whole realistic science element is clearly the hook that's supposed to lure you into this show when you begin, to me, that's not even the best part of this entire show. Yes, this element is fantastic to see and is a genuinely interesting original idea to run along with, but the show itself and the story and characters it brings to the screen all come together to make this show an even greater show than it already was. The tone of Dr. Stone, judging solely by what I've described thus far, has the potential to run in several directions. Think about it. The whole world has been catastrophically attacked by some mysterious force that has swiped out the entire human race for 3,700 years, turning them to stone. This is an apocalypse anime. Humanity is gone, and only a few rare survivors remain to take on the harsh world of nature only our ancestors had to suffer through years and years ago. Lions are let loose, toxic berries aren't labeled, and there's no Wi-Fi ever. Dramatic, dark, gut-wrenching, and tense. That's what Dr. Stone could have been with the world it was given. Or forget that, although this is technically the exact same world as we've already been in, after that massive time jump, our protagonist has been reawakened in another world. Everything's different and he is the lone outsider. This is yet another isekai anime. It's another power fantasy adventure. Except Dr. Stone doesn't take that route either. Our protagonist Senku may be a knowledgeable genius, but he's not got that power fantasy trope. This world is dipped in realism and every challenge is a real challenge he has to face. No, instead of being this gritty, pessimistic world of death or this colourful pipe dream of some fantasy land, Dr. Stone's choice of tone for the entire show is simply neutral, much like the nature of science itself, with only the characters of the show and their sense of humanity being the driving force leading the show to be optimistic and yet logical on its approach of how the story is presented. Yes, the entire human race has been turned to stone, and yes, this is technically an isekai world, but Senku doesn't look upon this event as a saveless tragedy or a chance to chase some lacy catgirls. No, Senku looks upon this world as if it is a massive opportunity. An opportunity to represent the true extent to what humanity can do and has done before. An opportunity to inspire hope in those that are conscious now for those who are still currently in their unconscious stony state. The show gives out these genuine moments that make you look back and think, wow, we humans really did that. Being given the perspective of just how cruel and abnormal the natural world is to our own, and seeing all of these technological advancements we've managed to make in spite of that, seeing how far we've come as a species, and really being able to appreciate just how ironically magical science is to have actually brought us up to this point. Those kind of moments are just the tip of the iceberg in seeing just how hopeful this show is, and is still only a single piece of why I find so much fulfillment in watching this series so far. It's just so wholesome, and I just love me some wholesomeness. Maybe I should make a wholesomeness anime video too. No other anime gives me that feeling of true pride for what humanity has achieved, and it really puts everything we take for granted in perspective. Like, yeah, we humans really did conquer the night. The ever-looming overcast of darkness that plagues the Earth 50% of the time is a far less significant problem to modern civilization compared to how it must have been hundreds and hundreds of years ago. The invention of electricity and electric lighting has renovated the entire surface of our planet to the point where there's too much light to effectively see every star in the sky. And in a world of rock and wood, how did we possibly come to create such electrical power? Now, I'm doing my best here to not talk too much about what happens later in the show and keeping fairly vague for those that have yet to sit down and watch it, because you totally should, but Dr. Stone is not without its specific flaws, which you may want to keep in mind if you are thinking of picking this series up for the first time. The smallest flaw that I just have to mention, because I'm sure someone else will mention it somewhere if I don't, is that Dr. Stone's science is not 100% accurate, as oftentimes the success rate and efficiencies of the primitive devices Senku constructs ends up being just a little bit more weighted in his favor for the sake of narrative, but generally, the scientific elements of the plot that all comes together are accurate. One of the more prominent complaints that Dr. Stone viewers do have, though, ironically, is with the very beginning of the show. Now that my girlfriend and I are like 16 episodes in, we cannot stop watching and we're officially here for the long run, but the first chunky arc introduced at the start is not nearly as investing and gripping as its latter counterpart. And the main reason for this is the characters introduced. Disregarding Senku, we also end up meeting his childhood best friend, Taiju, who introduces us to the world at the very start, and very much plays the role of the brawn to Senku's brain. As a duo, they're a pretty simplistic pair. And as for Taiju's motivations, he really just wants to confess his love to his former classmate who has been turned to stone. That is pretty much his entire character. The arc at the start of working out how to turn stone back into people lines up great for Taiju's goals, as it involves his love interest directly, obviously, but once that whole aspect is passed and finished, Taiju as a character has a lot less going for him to be explored. Sure, he's generally a good guy and has connections to the people around him, but he's not nearly as in-depth as many of the other characters in the show, plus his strength is a little unrealistic too. Similarly, the antagonist to the show, Tsukasa, is fairly flat too in how they wish to rebuild humanity into a better world by killing all adults and rejecting the progression of science. While his plans seem a little weighted to just being evil because, genocide is evil, he also comes across as overly powerful in how he is stronger than Taiju's brawn, being able to kill lions with a single punch, how realistic for a sciencey show, as well as standing on par with Senku's brains. As a character, at the very least during these early stages, he's simply too basic and powerful, which similarly grinds some people's gears. Where the show really shines is through the natural progression Senku makes within this stone world, and how he dramatically changes the lives of the people around him. And this element is very much felt in full force after these characters take a step back away from their usual screen time. I won't go into details, but when Senku practically restarts with the people he surrounds himself with, the show really starts to stand on more solid footing and proves to be grander and grander with each releasing episode. And we've only been watching with the anime so far, so I have no clue how crazy and fantastic the show is yet to go through reading the manga or anything. Yet. This show might convert me. And then there's the soundtrack. My god, the soundtrack. I'm a big fan of soundtrack music in general. The music you hear in the background of all of my videos are songs I genuinely listen to all the time. Instrumental stuff is just my jam. So naturally, Dr. Stone only seems to get better for me as the soundtrack to this show is just beautiful. Sometimes it hits with this angelic piano with this rising backing as we see the world around Senku change and evolve around him, as we see humanity's knowledge being slowly inherited back into the world. Other times it's gentle, pondering how certain challenges can be tackled and how real-world elements can be applied for any given situation. And then there's bagpipes, used in an actually original way. What? This instrument has more than 2 songs from Scotland? And this track entirely works on highlighting just how beautiful the planet we live on truly is. Be it through the massive scale of nature taking back human territory, or by looking back on the good old days of the modern era with gigantic metal structures us humans built, or the simple magical powers of medicine and herbal experiments we've managed to put together. All to push us further as a species and inspire us to appreciate that as creatures with this knowledgeable power, it feels like we could achieve anything, overcome anything. And even in the face of a world turned to stone, with a little bit of humanity, we do have a chance to continue. There's hope for all of humankind to continue henceforth, and all of that can just be felt in just the starting track of the anime. This song is literally track number 1, and I just, it's so good. I feel bad for my neighbors who have to listen to it all the time through the walls. Now, this series is good so far, but I think one of the final things that really brings this show together, working alongside all of the other elements of hope, inspiration, wholesomeness, and the execution, is the characters of the show. I know I've already shot down a couple of early show ones, but let's talk about Senku for a moment. In a lot of anime, there's some sort of overpowered genius character trope. They're the ones that are so overconfident that literally nothing can get in their way, and they're the perfect power fantasy for any viewer who wishes they were a little stronger than they actually are. And Senku here could easily stick to his tropes and continue in a fairly bland and original fashion. But he doesn't. The character writing for him in particular is especially in depth, with him feeling like a genuine human. He's smart, sure, but he has flaws. On his own in his world, he sucks. He's not physically strong, his solutions take time, and he makes mistakes. Not to mention, many of the other elements of this genius trope are completely swiped away from him, making him his own character. He feels real emotions. He may take the logical approach where he can, but he cares about people. Be it the friends he surrounds himself with, the entirety of the human race, or his family, as much as he doesn't want to admit it. Senku genuinely wants to spread science and happiness as well back into the world around him, oftentimes making choices that'll make people happy over the one that's the most advantageous. He's warm and inspirational, whilst smart and dedicated to do the work as well. And similarly to him, the other characters he surrounds himself with, though I'll try not to spoil too much about them, have their own human interactions and motivations behind them. They each have their own thoughts and desires and different approaches on how to achieve them, or their stance on the events taking place around them. Now, the thing that really inspired me to make this video is the latest coverage on Senku's backstory and the characters from his past and how their fate turned out. And while I'd love to talk about the specifics, it's all spoilers, so please do go watch the show so I can make a follow-up video when this series finishes or something. But the emotional elements of the show is really shining through right now as we see how all of these human characters with their believable emotions and reactions respond to events, and how it only acts to highlight Senku's development as a character further. All of it is just so beautiful to see unfold and only adds more depth into this already investing story. Overall, yes, Ross, this show is basically anime Rick Sanchez meets primitive technology with a hint of Minecraft and Rust. And in comparison to the currently airing season of anime taking place right now, it's right up there on the top of my list. Most of the other shows I'm watching this season are sequel seasons upon sequel seasons anyway, and No Guns Life. And while there are plenty of other isekai animes this time around, I feel this show goes above all of those in originality, execution, and just plain heart. This show is absolutely fantastic, and if you haven't picked it up, you absolutely should. It's even got a whole 17 episodes for you to catch up on. Great for semi-binging. Available on Crunchyroll, which I'm not sponsored by the way, or you could pirate it. I don't care, I'm not your dad. I couldn't beat the best dad even if I tried. There's a little gush on a little anime show that really took me by surprise, and if you'd like to see more anime videos, do let me know. Otherwise, I'll see you again in a week. My name's been Dazz, you didn't really care, and I'll see you in a bit. What was that, 4 anime video suggestions going on? I didn't realize I had so many ideas until I started writing this whole thing out. If this video goes well and doesn't get sniped like my SpongeBob video did, then maybe I'll make it a reality. Turns out, reality is pretty damn impressive.